We welcome you to the Galbo Consulting annual drug-free workplace training. Each year, your company provides a drug-free workplace education, showing its commitment to safety, health, and productivity in the workplace. It is important that employees report to work fit for duty, not under the influence of any type of substance. That employees follow the company's safety rules as applicable in the drug-free workplace policy, and if there are unsafe behaviors or conditions, to report. It's important also for the supervisors to follow through with their responsibilities, monitor the job site behavior, seeing problems, document, and report, confront the employee, ensure that they are enforcing the company policy in a consistent manner. Maybe your company has an employee assistance program, which is a confidential resource, but in any case, resources who work with people with substance problems is all kept confidential. In some cases, rehabilitation and return to work options are applicable to employees who may have a problem. There is disciplinary action required when a employee is in violation of the drug-free workplace policy. Disciplinary action may be suspension up to and including termination. It's important as an employee to recognize that compliance of this policy is a condition of employment. Bottom line is commitment to safety on the job is everyone's responsibility, and thus everyone plays a role in that safety. If as an employee you have questions or unsure about the policy, ask your supervisor or manager to explain. Just remember that together we build a safer workplace. We can see from this graph that various companies have different percent of fatalities related to substance use on the job. Obviously, transportation, where people are driving a lot, is one of the highest areas of work where fatalities prevail. Construction is another high area of fatalities on the job. As you can see from this slide, there are 5 elements to a drug-free workplace or drug-free safety program. We're going to touch on each one of these, starting with policy. We are in the midst of doing our employee education. With supervisors, the training is built around the idea of reasonable suspicion and when should we test. What do we test for? And hopefully there are resources within your company to seek help if somebody seeks help on their own or someone does come up positive for a substance during working situations. Our company policy outlines the who, what, where, and when of testing. Within the policy, it protects the company from liability and it protects employees from injuries and accidents. Our policy is the same in all states if your company operates in more than one state. Let's listen to an expert on different state policies.
Almost every state in the United States has some type of different state law when it comes to drug testing programs and drug-free workplace programs. Now, some states outline very clearly and very specifically what they consider to be a drug-free workplace program. And so in those states, it's easy. You follow the state law. But, of course, you have to know that state law. In other states, there may be some nuances where something might be prohibited or something might be allowed. Some states are vague. So it's really important. Part of the services that we offer at National Drug Screening is that we have a comprehensive database of the laws in every state, and we can provide expert guidance to a company to help them and to write for them a comprehensive drug-free workplace policy and program, and then have addendums or amendments in that program to cover all the states that they operate in.
There are really 10 pillars to a good drug-free workplace policy. We see them listed here. What is the purpose or goal? Obviously, to keep people safe. Who is covered? Well, all employees are covered. When does it apply? What are prohibited behaviors, such as selling, using, coming to work under the influence? Drug testing. When will a person be tested? What are the consequences if you have a violation of the policy? And confidentiality obviously would be enforced. And in the case of companies like yours, where you are regulated by the DOT, your companies that are doing contract work for the state or the federal government or a particular county, and also hopefully a lot of companies benefit by reducing their workers' comp premiums by having a policy. Although no socioeconomic group can be singled out for substance abuse, we do find that there are some careers that statistics shows seem to have a higher rate of substance abuse and use. We find that in food services, for example, specifically fast food industry. Speaking from experience, I do know that most of these types of work do not do any type of drug abuse or substance testing. And thus, if someone is terminated at McDonald's, they can easily go down the street and find another job at Burger King or Kentucky Fried Chicken or wherever. The nursing industry has a high rate of substance use. Maybe it's easy access to drugs. Maybe it's the long hours they work. But again, no one particular factor or no one particular career is worse than another. When we look at athletes, entertainers, is it the excess of money and the excess of opportunity that leads to higher use? I don't believe that there is any one particular factor that leads a particular type of work into substance use, but many factors of and with itself. There are some typical warning signs that we will notice in a person who has a substance abuse problem in the workplace. Some of these problems are unsteadiness, confusion. People become much more reckless. We see more accidents occurring, and there is a rise in absenteeism. We begin to see people in the workplace who are no longer reliable, and that their performance is deteriorating even in previously good employees. THIQ was discovered in the brains of alcoholics in Houston, Texas, by a scientist named Virginia Davis. She was doing cancer research at the time. In her study, she found human brains that of homeless winos who had died during the night and were picked up by Houston police in the morning. She discovered in the brains of those chronic alcoholics a substance that is closely related to heroin. This substance is THIQ, tetrahydrosoquinoline, or THIQ. Binge drinking is defined as 5 drinks at one setting. Does that apply to you? Did you know that binge drinking can actually change your DNA, and that a change in DNA can actually trigger people to crave alcohol even more? This was from a study from Rutgers that was done. And the answer, they say, could change the way we think about addiction, and even suggest some ways in which genetics affects alcoholism. A study by the LifeWorks and the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation has found that during COVID, nearly 1/3 of people in the U.S. who drink alcohol said they actually increased their consumption since the pandemic began. As we look at this chart, we also see that 29% of people who use other kinds of drugs have increased their drug use. All these factors that we discussed before about the stressors that people are dealing with being at home, work, shortages, all those kinds of contributing stressors have caused people to get into more use. But it's also brought about an interesting thing, too, in that it's began to push conversations about substance use and overuse into more of an open and drug and alcohol-related conversations. Consider at what age you first took a drink. Many people would say 15, 16, 17, but in today's world, the average age for boys is 11 years old, for girls 13. Nearly 10 million young people ages 12 to 20 reported they have consumed alcohol in the past 30 days. Let's take a look at some of the factors that contribute to this. Another contributing factor is adults who provide alcohol to 40% of underage drinkers, including a substantial number of parents and guardians. Another contributing factor is the fact that negative childhood experiences led people to earlier drinking, such as hardships of abuse, divorce, substance abuse in the home, which may more likely lead to using alcohol at a younger age. One final factor that I'll mention is that games contribute to youth drinking themselves to death. Federal records showed that a number of young individuals drank themselves to death, had extremely high blood alcohol levels, and many of these were attributed to drinking games of various types. So what is it that draws someone into an addiction? We know addiction is not only detrimental to the person with the alcoholism or addiction, but we also realize that it affects family members, especially those that are close to them. But what are some of the factors? And let's take a look at some of these factors that lead people into addictive behaviors. Let's take a look at some of the factors that can lead to addiction. And when I speak of addiction, I'm also referring to alcoholism, because when we think of alcoholism, we realize that people self-medicate with alcohol as well as maybe self-medicating with a drug, marijuana, or another type of drug. So as we look at this wheel, starting at the top, we realize that some people do not have coping skills for stress. In this, they have certain stressors in their life. We all do. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's the stress of being bored. We have day-to-day things that stress us all, whether it's traffic or a disagreement or concern for the future. We also find that sometimes people self-medicate for pain. Initially with physical problems like maybe shoulder problems, a lower back problem, a disc problem, that maybe a doctor has prescribed a medication and that person continues to use it even after they have been told that it is no longer feasible to continue. Other types of pain, mental pain, pain of anxiety, pain of worry, or consider veterans or first responders who are often diagnosed with what is known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, who get into self-medication. We all have situations in families, some more difficult than others. Maybe someone self-medicates to avoid dealing with a disruptive child or a child with some sort of a handicap or disability. Maybe we struggle with parents as they age or the loss of a parent. Or maybe, and in many cases, marital issues lead someone to drinking or drugging. We also find a situation, we call it comorbidity, where a person with alcoholism or drug addiction, once that is out of their system, we find that they're actually suffering from depression or anxiety or a bipolar disorder, some type of mental health situation. Most often, we see or think about peer pressure leading people into substance use, especially with adolescents, but we also find that even adults are drawn in to heavy drinking or substance use by peers and peer pressure. And the bottom line is, no one with an addiction, you can safely say, or with alcoholism, doesn't suffer from some sense of low self-esteem, a feeling of not being enough, of not being able to provide for or meet the norms of society. Often the lack of understanding of addictions leads to judgments. If this person had moral principles, they wouldn't be doing this. If they had stronger willpower, they could quit. Don't they see that they have a choice, and that choice could support the stopping of the use of the substance that is affecting their lives and the lives of those around them?
So what is drug addiction? Addiction is a chronic disease. It's characterized by drug seeking, use that is compulsive, difficult to control, and despite the fact that there are harmful consequences. Initially, the decision to take drugs is voluntary for most people, but repeated drug use can lead to brain changes that challenge an addicted person's self-control, interfere with the ability to resist intense urges to take drugs. On the next slide, we will see what happens to the brain when a person takes drugs. Let's take a look at what happens to the brain when a person takes drugs. Most drugs affect the brain's reward circuit, which causes euphoria as well as floods it with the chemical dopamine. In a properly functioning reward system, motivates a person to repeat behaviors they need to thrive, such as eating, spending time with loved ones, etc. Surges of dopamine in the reward system cause the reinforcement of pleasurably but unhealthy behaviors like taking drugs, which lead people to repeat the behavior again and again. As a person continues to use drugs, the brain adapts by reducing the ability of cells in the reward system to respond to it. This reduces the high the person feels compared to the high they felt when they first took drugs. This effect is known as tolerance, or a tolerance increase, thus causing the person to use more and more to get the same type of pleasure.
So why do some people become addicted to drugs or alcohol and others don't? Well, really, there's no one factor that can predict if a person will become addicted or alcoholic. It's usually a combination of factors that influence the risk. The more risk factors a person has, the greater chance. Some of those risks are such things as biology, what we call genetic predisposition. Sometimes a person may have another mental disorder of some type, which influences their draw towards addiction. The environment that people are raised in can be a factor. Children seeing parents feeling like use of a substance, for example, marijuana, which is now recreationally approved, is an okay thing. And therefore, that environment can have an influence. Also, development. Certain substances taken at a critical time of a young person's development stage can affect their risk for addiction. So these are some of the factors that we know can cause some people to become addicted and others not. Let's take a look at some statistics and information that are current and have recently been seen. Actually, 85% of online pharmacies don't require a prescription. Thus, let's say a doctor has prescribed a medication for a patient for pain and then decides that it's time for that patient to no longer take the prescription. This person, if they've become addicted and overused the medication the doctor's prescribed, can actually go online and make a purchase themselves without even requiring having a prescription. How about alcohol abuse among returning veterans? Statistics show that so many veterans returning from Iraq and Afghan wars are troubled with post-traumatic stress disorder untreated, and thus they learn to self-medicate, number one, through the use of alcohol and abuse of alcohol. To support the preceding slide, actually a survey of active duty veterans and National Guard personnel found to exposed to combat in Iraq or Afghanistan significantly higher use of heavy drinking. If you recalled earlier slide, we talked about tolerance increase. So if heroin isn't enough, now people are seeking out the drug fentanyl mixed in heroin to deal with their tolerance increase. In the city of Columbus alone, in one day there were 12 overdose deaths that involved fentanyl. Many states now have laws that allow not only medical but recreational marijuana use. So this question kind of has come to the surface in a lot of companies. What are the accommodations for marijuana in the workplace? So your employee is smoking pot. Now what? Well, not long ago, a workplace drug screening that turned up marijuana use was a fireable offense. These days, employers face a more confusing patchwork of federal, state, and local laws regarding the drug and the consequences of a positive test, and maybe it isn't always clear. But at the federal level, marijuana is still illegal. The Controlled Substance Act lists the drug as a Schedule I, and while the Americans with Disability Act requires employers to make reasonable accommodations for qualified workers with disability, possessing and using marijuana for any purpose is still a federal crime, regardless of the state law. This means under the ADA, American Disabilities Act, employers do not have to accommodate marijuana use. At the state level, the path isn't always clear, and there can be conflicting federal and state laws. As the rules evolve and jurisdiction pass stronger protection, Ohio still stands that employers do not have to accommodate marijuana use in the workplace. So how does Ohio's medical marijuana law impact your drug-free policy? It's important for you to know there are several elements in the law that protect you, the employer, and your drug-free workplace program. Number one, employers do not have to permit or accommodate an employee's use, possession, or distribution of medical marijuana. Two, employers are not prohibited from refusing to hire, discharging, disciplining, or otherwise taking adverse action against a person who uses medical marijuana. Three, employers can drug test and have a drug-free program even if it is a zero-tolerance policy. Four, the law will not interfere with or change alcohol drug testing requirements that are mandated by the Department of Transportation. Five, and finally, nothing in the law permits a person to sue an employer who refuses to hire, discharge, discipline, retaliating or otherwise taking an adverse employment action related to medical marijuana. A person who is discharged from employment because of medical use of marijuana is considered to have been discharged for cause if their use violated an employer's policy.
So let's take a look at what we test for in the drug-free workplace safety program. Obviously, we test for alcohol with a blood alcohol level of 0.04, a 0.02 if a company is in a DOT situation, and we test for these 10 drugs: amphetamines, marijuana, which is whether it is legal, recreational, medically approved, cocaine, all forms of opiates, which include heroin, various pain medications that maybe are prescribed, fentanyl, PCP, barbiturates, benzodiazepine, methadone, propoxyphene, and the club drug ecstasy. Let's summarize what we've learned. Drug-free safety programs are put in place and supported by a policy in order that there is safety on the job, that we all go home at the end of the day to our families. Testing is done pre-employment, after an accident, when a supervisor or management has reasonable suspicion, possibly after a return to work. There are many drugs that we test for. For the DOT standard, there are 10. Some drug-free programs only test for 6 drugs. A part of the program is confidentiality about your test and the results of your test. If you test positive, there may be an opportunity for what we call a last chance agreement. And companies hope that employees will take a look at a problem if they do test positive and can refer employees to resources that might be available.